hurry, Alice got off at the last stop from the 6th bus, which had already become almost her own. The girl had traveled this route so often that she already knew every driver who worked on it. As usual, Alice was looking around. She liked this place. It would seem that there is still a city line, but it looks like you are somewhere in the village. Across the road, there are fields and meadows. On the horizon, the forest darkens in a narrow strip. It was especially beautiful here now, in the middle of summer, with bright flowers in the meadow. The scent of heated grass is in the air, and the sky is clear, and pale blue. A light breeze drives lush white clouds across it. This landscape invariably lifts Alice's spirits. And now the girl couldn't help but smile. After seeing nature, Alice turned around and went in a completely different direction. She has her own business here. The girl walked confidently along the path, trampled in the grass. She walks through it every week. First there, then back. Any Sunday, the girl is here. Of course, he misses it occasionally. For example, when he is ill, or if the weather is very unsuitable. A snowstorm, heavy downpour, frost, but this happens very infrequently. Alice still tries not to miss her visits, otherwise the girl feels somehow uncomfortable afterwards. Here it is, the old city cemetery. It's familiar. Trees grow quietly right among the graves. Now in summer, their lush crowns provide a pleasant shade. Alice already knows her way around here very well. At first, of course, the girl went here with her dad. Still, when the trouble happened, she was just a baby. She had just turned 9 years old. Alice is now 13. She is almost as tall as her father, one of the tallest in the class, and generally looks more like a girl than a child in the mirror. I wonder if her mother would have recognized her if by some miracle they had met now. But this will never happen. Because when Alice was in the 3rd grade, her mother was hit by a drunk driver right at the crosswalk. Then Alice heard people talking about this tragedy. The car flew around the corner, took off as if from nowhere. The woman crossing the road at that moment in the prescribed place did not have a single chance, so the car tore it down and sped past. All this at high speed. The driver didn't even slow down. As it turned out later, he did not even notice what he had done. He got so drunk. He walked in a nightclub from evening to morning, and then decided that he was sober enough to get home in his own car. In the early morning, this man ran over a woman who was in a hurry to work. Alice had to walk across the street that morning by her mother's hand because the girl studied at the same school where her parent taught. Every morning they went to their place of study and worked together, but Alice stayed at home that ill-fated morning. She had a fever the day before, so she was not allowed to go to school. Who knows what would have happened to Alice if it hadn't been for the disease? Witnesses of the tragedy called for help. The injured woman was taken to the intensive care unit. Alice's father got a call right away. He had just reached the factory where he worked as an electrician. The man immediately rushed to the hospital. In general, he immediately had a lot of things to do. Conversations with the police, searching for the right medicines, buying things his wife needed in the hospital. But Alice did not know about what had happened until the evening, until her father came home. She didn't even feel anything. She was comfortable at home alone. Classmates were sitting at desks and boring paragraphs, solving difficult examples. Alice, buried in a blanket, was reading her favorite book about the adventures of the girl, Ellie, in a magical land. I also drank tea with cookies. It's beautiful. In the evening, much later than usual, Dad came home. Mom was still not there, but Alice was not worried about this. Probably the school was delayed again, a parent-teacher meeting or some kind of disco where the teacher is on duty. This is not uncommon. From the sad face of the parent, the girl immediately realized that something terrible had happened. Alice had never seen Dad in such a state, pale, disheveled, and with dark circles under his eyes, and his gaze was frighteningly extinguished. The father did not ask, as usual, if his daughter had dinner, did not become interested in lessons, and did not even ask about Alice's well-being. The man sat the girl down in front of him, put his big firm hand on her shoulder, and uttered terrible words. Mom was no longer there at that time. The doctors could not save her. The injuries were too serious. The father had to tell his 9-year-old daughter about it. Years later, Alice realized that it was very difficult for him at that moment. How does it feel to choose the words to tell such terrible news to a small child? Of course, she cried and roared so much that later she couldn't even move her arm or leg. She was so weak. The father silently stroked his daughter's back and head, saying something comforting. It was difficult for him himself. He was barely holding back tears, holding only for his daughter's sake. Horses in the sky. Now Mom is not around. She looks at us from there and sees everything. Mom will also help you. She just won't be very close. These words, spoken by her father in a difficult moment, were firmly sunk into the girl's heart. Alice clutched at them like a drowning man clutching at a straw. It was probably the best thing her father could have done for her back then. Alice has been convinced for a long time that this is the case. Since then, the girl has often looked at the clouds. It seemed to her that her mother could see her face better at that moment. The baby really felt better at the thought that her mother was looking at her, still loved her daughter, and was trying to help her. Now, as a teenager, Alice has almost lost faith in the fact that her mother is watching and looking after them. But the habit of looking at the sky and clouds has not gone away. Once in the shade of the trees that grew in huge numbers in the cemetery, Alice, as always, felt a strange calm. It was a good thing that his father did not have enough money to bury his wife in the new cemetery during that black period, for their small Alice somehow ended up there. It was about 2 years ago. Something wrong with this vaunted and prestigious new cemetery. Too much territory, too many graves and visitors, too wide paths paved with beautiful cold tiles. It was as if everything was aligned according to a ruler. Clear lines, perfect symmetry, lots of light, and of course no grass or trees. It's better here, cozier and calmer, even more sincere somehow. Sometimes Alice looked at other graves. There were also quite old burials in this quiet cemetery. There were people who were born in the century before last. Alice looked at old photographs, read unusual names that are no longer found. I wondered how these people lived, who they were, what they dreamed of. And here is my mother's grave. Alice now smiled at the monument when she came to visit her mother, and once she could not look at it without tears. Mom smiled from the black stove tenderly and a little sadly, as if she was very sorry that she could not be near her daughter. Alice got down to business. There were always 5 liters of water in the corner next to the fence. The girl carefully made sure that the bottle did not remain empty. Alice brought rags with her. Now she softened the napkin and began to rub the monument as usual. In summer, it quickly became somewhat dusty and dim. Sometimes crows, local residents, also left traces of their vital activity. To wipe the monument, remove dry leaves and debris, which are often carried by the wind, she performed all these actions. In winter, there was less work, only to sweep the snow from the monument and occasionally remove the garbage. But Alice still went to her mom's every Sunday just to visit. The girl is so used to it. But it was still hard for Dad to come here. Alice understood this perfectly well. My father's eyes were filled with such pain at the sight of the monument that it was impossible to look at the man. That's why the girl tried to visit her mother and take care of the grave herself. Unlike her parent, it wasn't that difficult for her. But my father came. Of course, he visited his wife. He always brought a luxurious bouquet on her birthday and also carried out general cleaning, did something else, but it hurt him. It was unbearably painful to be in this place, but Alice didn't feel that way. On the contrary, here she felt some kind of acute closeness with her mother and even talked to her, sometimes in a low voice. Then after the tragedy, Alice and her dad were left all alone in the whole wide world. Somehow it turned out that they had no other relatives. My father grew up in an orphanage. Alice knew this from an early age. Dad didn't have any parents. No, somewhere, of course, there were people who gave birth to a baby and immediately left it. Perhaps the father even had brothers and sisters, nieces and nephews, only it was not possible to find out now. My father received an education in an orphanage, graduated from high school and a construction college, and became a certified electrician. After graduating from an orphanage, as an orphan, the boy got a small apartment on the edge of the city in an old house, but his own. He served in the army and got a job, began an independent adult life. It wasn't easy to get used to the fact that he was on his own now, but the smart kid coped with everything. And then, one day, my father met a girl. Looking into her eyes, he realized that he was missing. He had never felt this way before. And it was, of course, Alice's mother. Then, of course, the future. The girl has heard the story of her parents' acquaintance, and more than once, her mother also told her about it. It happened on the football field. Alice's father was an avid football player. After work, he chased the ball along with the same football fans of all ages. There were teenagers and very grown-up family people in their team. They were all united by their love of the sports game. These were not professional at all, but bright and emotional matches were watched. There were benches and even mini stands around the football field, which were always full of people. Curious boys, girls sighing for young football players, and just people who were interested in watching the game. And then one day, Anne turned out to be on one of the benches, a girl whom a young graduate of an orphanage noticed from the very beginning. He was hooked by her eyes and a soft, gentle smile. This is a young person who somehow stood out very much from the rest, at least for him. The kid couldn't think about the match that night. His gaze was fixed on that very bench all the time. Sometimes he even made eye contact with the girl who had such an influence on him. The young man kept thinking about how to get to know her and found nothing more original than intentionally sending the ball to that very bench. The girls caught the ball laughing. A resourceful football player ran up to them to pick him up. Everything was going according to his script. The boy then got into conversation with the girl he liked, and she also clearly liked him. They met, then started dating, then got married. Only they had to leave for another city because of some problems. Alice still didn't know what those cases were. It seems that something happened to my father's job, or something, but why didn't Mom communicate with her parents? She had a family. Of course, Alice asked these questions to her father and mother. At a certain age, the girl noticed that her friends had grandparents. They gave their grandchildren gifts, cooked delicious pancakes for them, took them to the cinema and the amusement park, and in general just loved and adored their grandchildren. Alice wanted it too. My parents didn't like talking about such topics. The girl, although she was still quite a baby, understood this. The parents, we've become strangers. It happens, my mother explained confusedly. They don't even know that they have such a wonderful granddaughter. So maybe you should tell them. What if you make up then? My mother shook her head sadly. There are situations when nothing can be returned and nothing can be fixed. And what? You and I can become strangers someday too. The girl was amazed at her own conclusions. Not at all. Smiled, she hugged her daughter tightly and added, "We are the dearest in the world." And I also felt like a complete stranger when I was a child. There was no warmth and acceptance between us from the very beginning. Of course I didn't understand this when I was a child. And the three of us, you, me, and Dad, we are the closest and dearest. We will always be there. Alice tried not to bother her mother with questions because she saw that it was unpleasant for her to remember her relatives. Well, then don't. The girl was quite satisfied that in their small family, everyone loves each other very much and always supports a cheerful and strong dad who constantly comes up with something interesting to surprise and please his daughter and wife. An understanding, sensitive mother. What else is needed for happiness? Alice knew the answer to that question. She dreamed of a brother or sister, but her parents explained that they needed to get back on their feet first, become more independent, and only then think about a second child. Alice really wanted this moment to come as soon as possible, but an intoxicated driver crossed out all the plans and hopes of a happy little family. He was quickly found then. There was a trial. The culprit of the accident turned out to be a very young guy, the son of a local deputy. They didn't even put him in jail. Miraculously, it turned out that the brakes had failed in a brand new foreign car. That is, as it were, the accident occurred without the driver's fault. Witnesses claimed that the driver was drunk, but these indications somehow got lost and disappeared. The examination miraculously showed the absence of alcohol in the driver's blood. It is not surprising, given the position and connections of the young guy's father. The parents of the perpetrator of the tragedy paid a small fine and the case was hushed up. My father then tried to achieve justice, appealed to the courts, to the prosecutor's office. He demanded a more thorough investigation, and it was important to him that the culprit suffer at least some punishment. But the man ran into obstacles everywhere. Alice didn't care if the driver was punished or not. She wanted Dad to be around more often. During that difficult period, hugging, talking about how mom was watching them from the clouds, stroking her hair. But the girl often had to stay alone because the parent ran through all sorts of instances in the hope of getting justice. Later, Alice realized that perhaps by taking on a lot of things, he was trying to somehow distract himself from the unbearable pain. It was as if my father had been replaced after the tragedy. He hardly smiled, did not joke, and no longer started noisy fun games with his daughter as it used to be. But Dad started cooking and learned how to braid a girl before school. He was doing a lot of things now that his mother used to do. My father was doing great. But of course, Alice sorely lacked maternal care. As time passed, the girl got used to her new life. My father seemed to have come to his senses too. Now you could sometimes see a wide smile on his face again. Time takes its toll. Anyway, Alice was ready for the fact that one day a new woman would appear in their house. The neighbors talked about it, and friends at school. Yes, the girl herself understood perfectly well that her father had the right to a private life, but he did not even look at other women. My father still missed his wife very much. Alice saw this, and she was worried about her loved one. The girl wanted him to be happy. The life of the daughter and father somehow quickly got better. The girl took over some household duties, the parent. Their house was always clean and smelled of delicious food. The daughter and father made a good team. A couple of times Alice tried to find out from Dad about Mom's parents. Naturally, she had questions. Now more than ever, she wanted to feel like a part of the family, to feel the care and support not only of her father but also of other relatives, and she has them. That's for sure. My father was reluctant to talk about them, that Cleety treated your mother badly. Maybe it wasn't out of spite that they did it, I don't know, but she didn't want to communicate with them, and neither did they. When the tragedy happened, I tried to contact them. I called her mother several times. When she heard my voice, she immediately hung up on me. They don't even know what happened to their daughter. Well, see, yes, it's weird. Don't they even care where she is? What's wrong with her? That's exactly what's strange. The father agreed. Once these people just cut their daughter out of their lives simply because she wasn't as comfortable as they would like. Every time he talked about his wife's relatives, his father plunged into dark memories. There was a shadow on his face, and his eyes were filled with longing and sadness. Alice didn't like seeing her father in such a state, so she tried not to bother him with these questions. There was some kind of secret in their family. She understood that, but since it hurt her father so much to remember it, well, she wouldn't insist. Maybe when Alice gets a little older, her father will tell her everything. And right now it looks like her parent is just protecting her from some information. Alice rubbed the monument with vigorous movements. She was completely alone in the cemetery. It happened a lot. Occasionally, the girl met other visitors. During the church holidays, there were a lot of people here. Alice came here for the first time, completely alone, a couple of years ago. Before that, her father took her to the cemetery. But this rarely happened, and the girl wanted to see her mother more often, and my mother loved cleanliness and order so much. Alice thought that her grave needed to be cleaned much more often, but these visits were hard for her father. Besides, he worked a lot and he had other things to do. And then one day the girl herself got on the 6th bus and arrived at a familiar stop. Alice was not afraid to get lost. She already knew the way very well. At first, the girl felt uneasy. Alone in the cemetery, then she felt calm and peaceful. Since then, Alice has been coming here every Sunday. The father, upon learning about his daughter's trips, was surprised but not angry. Beanstreet, aren't you afraid of being alone? Exene, Alice answered honestly. Oh, but at least warn me when you go there. I still need to know where my child is. Since then, Alice has always informed her father before going to the cemetery. Sometimes he went with her. Sometimes he passed a bouquet of flowers with his daughter so that she would leave it at the monument. When she finished cleaning, the girl put the water bottle back in place and hung a rag to dry on the fence. Now we need to weed the flowers. Olesia managed to grow bright peonies in the flower garden for the first time. However, the weeds appeared at breakneck speed, so the girl had enough work. But it's nothing. But now my mother had lively and very beautiful, bright flowers. And suddenly, Alice didn't hear a sound. She just felt that someone was looking at her. The girl turned around sharply. People in the cemetery are, in general, a common thing. You never know who comes here to visit relatives, but someone was staring intently at Alice. And this is already strange. The girl met the gaze of sad gray eyes. A woman was staring straight at her. Her face was vaguely familiar. Alice definitely saw her somewhere, probably. The woman looked at the girl with an expression of longing on her face. Tears were streaming down her cheeks, which the stranger did not seem to notice. Alice has often seen similar looks. Many people looked at her with pity. Especially here in the cemetery, people saw a girl cleaning up the grave of a young woman, clearly her mother, and this story touched many. Alice is used to attracting attention, but this is the first time the girl has seen tears and such pain in the eyes of a random passerby. Alice involuntarily backed away from this strange woman. Perhaps the visitor is now acutely experiencing her own. After all, she came to the cemetery. There are flowers in her hands, a bouquet of daisies. By the way, my mother also loved daisies very much, so my father always tried to bring these flowers here. Yes, he often gave her daisies during her mother's lifetime, Alice stammered. She usually didn't talk to other visitors, and they didn't talk to her either. It wasn't accepted somehow, but here this situation is strange. This woman is looking at her too intently. The pause dragged on. You have to say something. Hello? The woman said and smiled. This made her face even more familiar. Perhaps the woman recognized Alice. Maybe it's some friend of Mom's? Do we know each other? The girl clarified. The situation was becoming more and more strange and incomprehensible. The woman was clearly not going to go any further. She looked at Alice, at the picture of her mother on the monument, and couldn't hold back. It was a good thing she wasn't getting any closer, because Alice was already starting to worry. No, we don't know each other, but I know your mother very well. Or rather, she knew. The woman finally noticed her own tears and feverishly wiped them right on her shirt sleeve. She was clearly trying to pull herself together, so indeed, they were once close. I came to visit a friend, and Alice is here. What a meeting. This is already interesting. Maybe the visitor will tell Alice something about her mother. The girl has always been interested in this, because she was just a baby when everything happened. Ooh, so you came to visit your mother? Alice clarified. The woman nodded. The girl broke into a smile. She was pleased that not only she and her father remembered about her mother. Her friend came with flowers. They must have had a close relationship once. Apparently, she had met this woman before, but she did not remember. For a reason, her face seemed familiar to the girl. Alice stepped aside, letting the woman pass to the monument. X said, this lady said with a smile through her tears. She came closer and put flowers at the monument. I finally found you. However, I had no idea what I would see. I have so much to tell you. Alice decided to leave the woman alone with her grief. It seems that she recently found out about her friend's death. Let her cry calmly, and Alice will go to the garbage pile and take a bag of dry leaves. She will not interfere with this woman. Let her talk, and then they will certainly talk. I wonder why didn't she know about her friend's fate? Does she know anything about Mom's parents? Hundreds of questions were born in Alice's head. We need to pull ourselves together and try not to overwhelm a stranger with them. When Alice returned, the woman already looked almost calm. She looked at the girl and smiled. You're so grown up, the stranger said. How old are you? 13, a wonderful age. How quickly time flies. It would seem that recently your mother and I were the same age. And now, now like this. And how do you know my mother? The woman was confused. The question seemed to take her by surprise. She was obviously choosing her words for an answer. It's kind of weird. Question as a question, CC. NPS get to know each other first. FITAs, the woman suggested. My name is Irene. And yes, I've known your mother since she was very young, so you're from her hometown. Did she leave there when she and Dad got married? Yes, I'm from there. Alice was beaming. It's so interesting. So Irene should know about Mom's relatives. They seem to be childhood friends, a messenger from the past. Wow, what a stroke of luck that they bumped into each other at the cemetery today. My name is Alice. Do you know why your mom liked that name so much? The girl also smiled and nodded. Of course she knew. Her mother had told her about it many times. Mom's favorite childhood book is Alice in Wonderland. Yes, that's right. She must have read it 100 times. And I watched the cartoon. and Alice named all her dolls, and she made claims to her parents that she was not named Alice. It even happened. Alice was wary. Erin herself started talking about Mom's parents. She obviously knows them, and she knows her mother, and very well. If this is a friend, then without any doubt, a very close one. But why didn't Mom ever talk about her? Alice knew Aunt Sveta, Aunt Tanya. These are my mother's friends and colleagues. They often came to visit them. The girl was friends with their children. But she and her mother never even talked about this Irene. Weirdness after weirdness. And you? How do you know my mother? Alice asked. Oh, girl. We need to talk, very seriously and thoroughly. Can we go somewhere else? The conversation is long and difficult. There should be peace here. Alice nodded. She completely agreed with this woman. And have a car nearby, said Irene. We can drive to some cafe, and we'll talk there. And then I'll take you home with me. Alice shook her head negatively. No, she definitely won't sit in a car with a stranger. The woman, catching herself, spoke again. No, I understand everything. Of course you're right not to trust a stranger. That's right. Well done. It was just out of confusion that I suggested this to you. I didn't think I'd meet you here. It baffled me. I wasn't ready. Alice smiled. The girl was afraid that the woman would be offended by such distrust, but Irene also praised her for her vigilance. An adequate response, and Nate's work, first 10 nearby, Alice said. You need to walk along the curb for 150 meters. I saw him, Marina nodded. Let's go for a walk. I generally like to walk, she made doing, Alice admitted. Surprisingly, it was easy and pleasant for her to communicate with a strange woman. And her face, she still felt like she had seen Irene somewhere before. Only where and when, the girl couldn't remember. On the way, they talked about Alice's life. Irina asked the usual questions. What grade does the girl study in? How many friends does she have? What subjects does she like? Alice saw that Irene was really interested in everything about her life. These are not routine questions to keep the conversation going. And the girl was happy to talk about her business. Irina was sincerely glad that Alice was making progress in literature. And when she found out that she became the winner of the city Olympiad among schoolchildren, she was completely delighted. The power of genes, said Irene in incomprehensible phrase to Alice. This woman generally raised a lot of questions from the girl. Alice planned to receive answers to them in the very near future. Finally, the girl and the woman reached the cafe, a cozy place, appreciated Irene. Alice nodded. She had never been here, but she constantly saw the cafe from the bus when she went to the cemetery. The girl did not think that she would ever become a visitor to this institution. Oh, where are we going to sit? Irina asked. Alice shrugged her shoulders. What's the difference? And then Irina chose a table by the window herself. Alice and Irene sat on comfortable chairs opposite each other. The waiter, a charming, smiling guy, immediately approached them. Probably a student or a high school student on a side job. Oh, what will you have? Irene glanced at Alice. The girl was embarrassed. It was already kind of awkward and uncomfortable. Irene understood everything. Don't be shy. We have a long conversation, and I guarantee that you will soon forget about any embarrassment. It won't be up to that. Intrigued, Alice admitted. Irina ordered herbal tea and 2 cakes. Alice followed the woman with interest, who seemed to know a lot about her mother. Irene smiled at the waiter when he brought the order. It was obvious that she was very worried and did not know where to start. Alice looked at her expectantly. The girl's heart was pounding wildly. Father, do you have a good relationship with your father? Irina asked suddenly. And good ones, Alice answered honestly. Father, this is her only family member. Oh, he works a lot. He still hasn't gotten over his grief, but Dad tries so hard to make his daughter's life happy and joyful. It is impossible not to notice and appreciate it. It's a pity that Father doesn't joke and smile like he used to. No, he's trying, but it's still not the same. Alice hoped that her old father would return one day. Light, humorous, and funny. He just needs more time. I had no doubt. EA smiled Irene. Anthony has always been wonderful. It's a pity that it wasn't obvious to everyone in the family. Alice nodded. She looked at Irina and waited for the promised truth. And Dad, did he tell you something about Mom's family? Very little. I realized that there had been some kind of major quarrel, but I still don't understand what it was about. I used to be small and somehow I didn't care. And now, after what happened with Mom, it hurts him to talk about it. I'm not bothering to ask him yet. You are a very wise and sensitive girl. Irina sighed sadly. Poor Anthony. He loved Anna so much, more than himself, more than life. How is he holding? Oh, he's trying. I think there is your merit here. Smiled Irene, and then she suddenly began her long-awaited story. Alice sometimes forgot to breathe in the process of her narration. The story captured the girls so much. Two sisters lived in a wonderful small town, SEAA. This is how Irene began her long story. Girls were born into a wealthy family. Their father was a successful and very well-known businessman in the city, a monopolist of some kind. Mother worked as a chief accountant at a large factory. However, after giving birth to 2 daughters one after the other, she left the post. It was a mutual wish of the spouses. Someone had to take care of the children. Alice smiled. For some reason, she immediately realized that one of the girls had her mother. Sisters were never denied anything in their childhood. They lived with their parents in a beautiful country house, a large garden, a private playground with swings and carousels, a swimming pool, even a small tree house. All the girls' wishes were fulfilled almost instantly. An expensive toy from the store. Choose anyone. A dress for a matinee from a branded boutique at the price of an average salary by the standards of your hometown. Yes, please. The girls were taken to resorts. They traveled a lot with their parents around the country, and the birthday parties resembling fairy tale balls were arranged for them. Both lived in an atmosphere of universal love and acceptance, like 2 little princesses. The eldest of the sisters was named Irene, the young Anne. The difference between the girls was only a year. No wonder the little ones were so interested. They were best friends together. The sisters played all day long in their house, the castle, and they were quite happy with each other's company. The girls were never bored. The parents also dreamed of a son, but childbirth with such a small interval adversely affected the mother's health. She could no longer have children, although she was treated by the best doctors in the country. Irene and Anne knew about this problem because their father often reproached their mother for not being able to give him an heir. He called her defective right in front of us. Mom didn't argue. She never contradicted her father at all, and it was difficult for him to object. Only we didn't understand it then. Our father loved us, pampered us, hugged us, smiled at us. Accordingly, we also adored him with blind, childish love. The father really wanted a son, it's true. Then I found out that when Anne was born, and not the son, he blamed the mother for this, shouted at her right on the day of birth. But Anne's father loved. It's hard to argue with that. He simply adored both of his daughters and accepted the girls completely while they were toddlers. The mother was the closest person to Irene and Anne. Soft, dear, taciturn, ready to fulfill all whims and desires to the jocks. You could say anything to her. She never argued with anything. It was the nanny who kept order. Many tricks didn't work with her. You couldn't eat the cake before the soup or go to bed late at night, and Mom allowed her daughters to do everything. How can I refuse you? She smiled in response to any request from the girls. Then, years later, the mother admitted that she just wanted to prolong the happy period of her baby's life. She knew that when the daughters grew up, they would have to face their father's despotism, and he would command his daughters in the same way as his wife. And there's nothing you can do about it. Who was the father to the kids in their early childhood? Someone distant, but loving and omnipotent. The girls knew that everything, absolutely everything, was in his power. It is he who creates the world for his family with his own hands. The girls were both afraid of him and loved him at the same time. The father was kind to his little daughters, but they always felt his cruelty and strength, and therefore tried to please the parent, make him smile, make the father's eyes light up with happiness. It could have been anyone with the girl's mother, but her father's favor still had to be earned. The little ones have felt this since they were very young. But time passed, the girls grew up, and now it was time to go to school. The age difference allowed the sisters to be sent to the same class. It's just that Irene started studying at 7.5 years old, and Anne, respectively, at 6.5. That's what my father decided. He thought it was a great idea to put his daughters in the same class. The mother tried to object. It was a rare case when she did not unconditionally agree with her husband's opinion. And just a kid, what kind of studies does she have? She should be dancing, painting, playing with dolls all day long. But objections, as always, were not accepted. There's nothing to suffer from nonsense for another year, my father replied confidently. Let them start learning too. Irina is nearby. She will help if anything.
The beginning of school coincided with the end of the sisters' happy childhood. No, the girls just liked studying. They were sent to a prestigious gymnasium with attentive, sensitive teachers and beautiful, state-of-the-art classrooms. It was interesting and exciting to be inside the walls of this institution. But now the father made serious demands on his daughters. The little ones had to go out of their way to meet the ideals of a strict parent. Unconditional love was out of the question. Irene and Anne were supposed to receive top marks, and they were also required to participate and win school Olympiads, engage in scientific projects, be the best students in the class, and also shine with athletic success. My father dreamed of perfect children. He did a lot to achieve his goal. From the very first grade, the girls were tutored in English and mathematics, and the little ones now attended many sections. Swimming, choreography, the Centre for Foreign Languages, but no one cancelled school either. Lessons, tests, projects. The girls here were supposed to be the best. Irina and Anne were taken to these additional classes by their mother and nanny. My father only inquired about the results and appeared at competitions from time to time. Irina still remembered how she cried at the first swimming tournament. She and Anne then came in the top 5, but did not take prizes. The girls were happy. They were very proud of themselves. In training, the little ones showed much worse results, but at the competitions they gave their best. But my father, who came to the tournament, looked disappointed. He needed medals. He looked at his little daughters with reproach then. "Couldn't you have tried harder?" The man curled his lips contemptuously. They both seemed to have taken after their mother. But if there was a son, he would show everyone. My mother, who was sitting next to me, was silent as always. She did not even think to stand up for her daughters. It was only when she got older that Irina realized that her mother did not interfere in order not to anger her husband even more. If she had said a word, he would have spoken even more insulting words to his wife and to his already upset daughters. Irina was crying with resentment at the time. Not in front of my parents, no. My father did not allow any signs of weakness. The girl was crying in her room. Anne sat next to her and patted her older sister on the back. She has always been stronger and more free inwardly. From an early age, the character of the youngest was noticeable. It was difficult to offend or annoy her. It was not easy for the girls to meet their father's high expectations. Over time, they learned, like their mother, to present the truth in a way that suited him. I had to dodge, cheat, but so what? The main thing is that the parent is satisfied. It's calmer for everyone. My father became more and more rigid and demanding. It was important to him that his children bypass children, friends and partners in everything. Soka may not have a son, but my daughters will give everyone a head start. The man said with satisfaction when Irene or Anne reported to him about their next victory. The sisters always had to outrun and outperform someone, an endless race. "It's a good thing we don't have a brother," Anne said more than once. "But he would definitely have a hard time." I nodded. My sister was right. My father had so many plans and hopes for an heir who had never been born that hardly anyone could withstand such a burden. It was hard for them, just girls. What can we say about the heir? The girls still had everything they wanted. Beautiful outfits, travel, pocket money. But freedom was sorely lacking. My father controlled all areas of their activities. The man spent a lot of time at work, but, nevertheless, managed to limit the freedom of his daughters. He had a lot of levers for this. Babysitters, tutors, a wife finally. The father decided what his daughters would do. For a long time, he tried to make cool programmers out of Irene and Anne. Eminent teachers were hired for girls. They attended many different courses, but the girls never began to figure out how much time they spent trying to delve into the science beyond their control. But all this, despite great efforts, remained for the sisters a Chinese letter. The father was angry, very angry, called his daughters stupid and lazy, demanded results. He did not pay attention to the girls' words that they were trying very hard, but nothing was coming out. Even the opinion of the programming teachers was not authoritative. He believed that they were just trying to lure out as much money as possible. Talking about the futility of further studies, they were stuffing the price. So Anne and Irene had to deal with a hateful and completely incomprehensible case every day for 2 years. It was hard and hurtful. Anne would have dreamed of attending a choreography class at this time. She was good at it. The girl ploughed across the stage like a light butterfly. Irene, and not only her, admired the graceful movements of the young dancer. The choreographer said that this girl has a great future. But dancing, in my father's opinion, is so frivolous, and I don't care that my daughter dreams about the stage.
The choreography is good for general development. The head of the family repeated, and it's still not worth getting too involved in this business. You need a serious profession that will make you rich, and these are dancing. It's all nonsense. My father also spoke about the hobby of Irene. She drew beautifully from an early age, but she had absolutely no time for art school, so the girl had to educate herself. Fortunately, there were already many video courses at that time. The girl did not experience a lack of educational information. On the internet, Irene's drawings caused a furor. The girl was a member of special interest communities. It was very pleasant to receive the approval and compliments of strangers. The mother modestly praised her daughter's work. After all, she knew her husband's opinion about the hobby of Irene. Fool can draw a picture, the parent said. You don't need a lot of intelligence for this. But such an occupation will not feed anyone either. If something happens to me, I will lose my business, and the poor artist will starve to death. No, it's better to try. Become a programmer, and then be a sought-after specialist. It's just a pity. Both of them are lazy and do not want to study. They do not appreciate the funds that I invest in them. In his own way, the father tried to protect his daughters, to give them a life start, and therefore demanded such unquestioning. That's why he did it, so that they had absolutely no time for the girl's passion, for what they really liked. After all, dancing and painting pictures will not feed anyone. It's just a useless pastime, the girls didn't turn out to be programmers. As a result, my father had to admit that time and money were wasted. The sisters were incredibly relieved the day they were allowed to stop programming. Only now their father has prepared new challenges for them. Now both girls were supposed to become cool economists. New classes have begun. Well, it wasn't what Irene and Anne dreamed of, but it was still much simpler and clearer. The father was really always in fear.
He was afraid of losing his business, his big house, his position in society. The man understood that this could happen sooner or later. There were examples of acquaintances in front of his eyes. He didn't want to end up in poverty again and live like he did in his youth. My father built his empire from scratch. The business world is cruel. Probably, in the struggle for financial well-being, he had to become so categorical. The man believed that he knew how everything should be. He and only he should choose what his children will do. Disputes and discontent, disagreement and other opinions. All this was perceived as a betrayal, as a threat to the safety of the family, and therefore was severely suppressed. Irina looked like her mother. She also considered her father to be almost a deity on whom the life of their family depended. If the father thinks so, then it is a priori correct. He's so strong, so domineering. He has tremendous experience. He is respected and feared by people. My father spends a lot of money, takes risks, spends a lot of time in the office, literally lives by work. Who are they next to this outstanding man? He must be obeyed, and his orders must be obeyed without question. But Anne, she was always different. She was not satisfied with this kind of life. In childhood, Anne was the only one from the family who was not afraid to enter into an open confrontation with her father. She tried to convey her opinion to the parent, gave reasonable arguments, argued with him, sometimes driving the man to white heat. He got angry, lost his temper, resorted to punishments. The punishments were mainly expressed in restrictions. For example, Anne was forbidden to watch TV, go to her favourite choreography, or eat sweets. For a certain time, of course, there was no talk of meeting with friends. The girls rarely communicated with their peers. There was simply no time for this. But at least sometimes she and her classmates went to the cinema or went for a walk in the park. Both sisters loved these meetings outside of home and school, but their father easily deprived the rebellious Anne of the desired entertainment. This was especially hard for her to bear. It's been worse. If her father lost his temper completely, he forbade Anne to even leave her room. Accordingly, Irina was not allowed to visit her sister to talk to her or comfort her. Neither was the mother allowed to do this. It happened that Anne spent 2 or 3 days in such confinement. Even food was brought to the room. The father was afraid of his younger daughter's love of freedom and disobedience. He said more than once that Anne and the whole family could have serious problems because of this. "Your stupid, stubborn character will ruin you," the father exclaimed, cursing with his obstinate daughter. And Irina was afraid. I was afraid for my sister, for her future. She felt sorry for Anne, who had to be a prisoner in her own house so often. Anne wondered in response to her older sister's words. "But Dell, I don't know. Yes, he makes me sit in this room, but at least sometimes I say what I think and do what I want. You and Mom are much more a prisoner of that house and father." And at first Irina did not understand what her sister was talking about. What kind of prisoner is she? It's Anne who can't leave the room, but she, Irene, is free right now, even this minute, to go outside and go, for example, to the store. Just hurry up, because after an hour of classes at the School of Economics, the driver will pick her up soon. Only then did I realize that her sister was right. And after all, Anne really got free in the end. Really? At what cost? But, apparently, for her, freedom was more expensive than comfort and good relations with her parents and even communication with her older sister. Most offensively, Anne allowed herself a lot. She could easily skip extra classes to go to the movies with friends from school. Yes, perhaps later the father will find out about everything and punish, but that will be later. For Anne, momentary freedom was more important. She was it worth it to do this, to be locked up for 2 days now? Asked Irina, standing under the door of the room. Steady was worth it, Anne confidently declared. We walked around the city, and then we sat and watched the movie together and laughed. They laughed so hard that the walls in the cinema were shaking. Then we wandered around the park and chatted about everything, and I felt so good, so much fun. It was definitely worth it. Come with us next time. But Irene never violated her father's prohibitions as a child. She was an obedient and very comfortable daughter. It was important to her that her father considered her good, that he loved and respected her. And the father really often set Irene as an example for his youngest daughter. Said and will achieve a lot. The father shared his opinion with his wife. She knows what she wants, and she always stubbornly goes to her goal, just not to miss it now. That's why I'm so strict with her, that with such a character you can achieve unprecedented heights, as well as get into huge trouble. We need to keep an eye on her until she grows up, and then it will surprise us all very pleasantly. Irina was offended to hear that. It turned out that the father had big plans for Anne, and despite the ugly behaviour of his younger daughter, her parents appreciated and respected her more. And she, Irene, who tries to obey her parents in everything and not upset them, seems to be in the shadow of her younger freedom-loving sister. They don't even expect anything special from her. Irina sometimes envied Anne, because her father clearly loved his younger daughter more. And Anne could also afford to do and say what she wanted. Not always, of course, but still within certain limits. But still, Irina was not capable of even a small part of what her sister was doing, and sometimes I wanted it so much. In early childhood, Irene and Anne were best friends. But the girls grew up, their interests and behaviour changed. The sisters were all estranged. Irina was very upset by this fact. She adored Anne and wanted to be like her in many ways, although she understood that this was impossible in principle. Her sister was her idol, her hope. Anne, of course, also loved her sister, but it was much more interesting for her to communicate with friends and girlfriends, of whom she always had a lot. But Irina did not have such a circle of communication. She always obeyed her father, and he did not encourage idle time. So Irina spent hours studying economics textbooks, instead of, like Anne, deceiving her parents going out with friends. My sister's life was attractive, but it seemed dangerous. Irina was afraid of many things. Disapproval of parents, harsh teenage jokes, trouble. After all, that could happen to children on the street. But Anne was not afraid of anything. She was looking forward to her coming of age so that she could finally start living the way she wanted to. Will immediately drop out of university and get a job, undreamed, thinking about the future. As your father will kill you, te Irena warned. T me will officially become an adult, an independent person, and smiled. What will he?
When the girls graduated from school, their father assigned them, as planned, to a prestigious university of economics. Irina liked studying. Thanks to her excellent training, she quickly became the best student in the course, which earned her father's approval and, on the other hand, made an average living, especially without bothering to study. The girl, having escaped at least partially from the control of a strict parent, enjoyed student life, and she looked quite happy and contented at that time. To Irina's surprise, she didn't care about the not-too-high grades at all, and made a mistake with the fact that, as an adult, she would get out of her father's control. He wasn't going to let her go until her daughter got an education. Irina suspected that later he would control the lives of his daughters in the same way. The father had a clear plan for the children. The girls get a diploma, get a job with him, become co-founders of his company, then marry young people who will also be approved by the father. Irina knew that these would be the sons of his partners, as the father dreamed of strengthening his empire, and the eldest daughter had nothing against it. Anne, too, was already sufficiently taught by bitter experience at that time not to enter into an open confrontation with her father. The girl did not drop out of university, as she once dreamed of. She tried, but her father quickly put her back in her. He then shouted at his youngest daughter so that the glass in the windows shook. Irina locked herself in her room and covered her ears with her hands, just not to hear all this, but she still caught every word. One night, she often ran away from home to go to a club with friends and at least take her soul away there. She couldn't completely obey her strict parent. And Irina, she was trying to reason with her younger sister. After all, if her father finds out that she is cheating, he will really put her in a hospital. The father is ready for anything, if only everyone obeys him. I almost don't care, Anne smiled sadly. I already live almost like in prison. If there are not at least these rare sips of freedom, I do not know what will happen to me. I can't live like this. Irina understood that sooner or later a real disaster would break out. A despotic father and a freedom-loving daughter both have strong characters. There will be storms, and so it turned out in the end. But a little later, after Anne met Anthony, the father took care of the family future of his daughters when they were still in school. Almost since she was a teenager, Irina knew who she would marry when the time came. Victor, the son of his father's partner, he was older than her. Tall, thin, with a charming smile and intelligent, thoughtful eyes. In general, Irina had nothing against such a party. At first, it was the jokes of adults at the table saying, "We have a merchant, you have goods," but the father gradually prepared the eldest daughter for the fact that she would have to connect her life with Victor. In one fell swoop, two goals at once. The children of wealthy families acquired a decent second half, and their fathers pooled cash. Of course, Irina was a little embarrassed next to Victor, and he also seemed to be embarrassed, but on the whole, the couple formed quite easily and naturally. Victor took the first step towards the future bride. As befits a man, he invited a girl to the cinema, and gladly agreed. Finally, she will go to the city with her boyfriend and go about her business. Not everyone can run. Only Irene gets official permission from her father for this walk. Importantly, she doesn't have to sneak out of the house and then sensory. The relationship developed like a textbook.
Flowers, dates, compliments, kisses. Sympathy flared up between the young people. Well, all this was soon followed by the expected offer. It was both interesting and very exciting for Irene. What does it feel like to live not with your parents? How does it feel to be your own mistress? The girl is used to relying on the opinion and authority of her father, and here he will not be around. Will Victor be able to become such a strong and reliable wall? He doesn't look that influential or strong.
Maybe Head has everything ahead of him. On the eve of the wedding, Anne was sincerely happy for her sister. "I see that you are really head over heels in love with this Victor of yours," she smiled. "You're right about that." Irina did not deny it, and that's great. "I also want to experience something like this someday. But what about these friends of yours with whom you go to the club, then to the cinema?" Irina was genuinely surprised. Anne has already had several light affairs that took place in front of, or rather, in the ears of her older sister.
To dream of a real feeling that blows the roof off. Irene got married and moved with her husband to a huge apartment in the city centre, which was given to the young by their parents. And she began a completely new life. It turns out that living under her father's wing, Irina missed a lot. The parent protected his daughters from everything, because the girl in her early 20s did not even imagine how fun and interesting life could be. Victor literally opened up a new world to his young wife. They went to clubs together, walked the streets of the city until morning, and had parties at home.
It was fun and exciting. Irina even began to understand her younger sister. That's what attracts her. That's where she's always running away to. Meanwhile, Anne, like her older sister, worked as an economist at one of her father's companies. She was good at it. But Anne often told Irene that it wasn't hers. "I would like to work with people, maybe even with children. And here are the numbers papers reports. It feels like I'm doing useless work." And why useless? "We help my father run the business," argued Irene. She just liked this kind of work. She was happy to delve into reports, unravel complex schemes, and look for errors. It's so on the one hand, it's calm. On the other, it's fascinating. And working with people? Well, no, she's too unpredictable, too nervous, too expensive. And then Anne somehow subtly changed. Irene, who knew her better than others, immediately realized that her sister had some kind of secret, that something was wrong with her sister. One day, when Anne came to visit her older sister, Irene asked her questions that had been of interest to her for a long time. "Oh, what's going on with you? I can see that something has happened. Come on, tell me." Anne looked at her sister and couldn't help but smile. She illuminated her beautiful face with an inner light, making the already regular features even more attractive. It was like magic. Irina even gasped.
"So you're right, sis. You really have a diamond eye," and intoned a little. "Yes, I have some news. I met a man, a guy, and finally fell in love. Exactly as I once dreamed. To the point of dizziness, butterflies in the stomach, and other romantic nonsense." "Wow!" Irina exclaimed. She didn't know whether to be happy for her sister or worried. It is unlikely that the tedious Sergio, the son of his father's companion, whom both old friends, had long been looking forward to as Anne's fiancé.
However, the bride did not take these conversations seriously. She considered them jokes and teased him. But Irina knew that. She knew her father wasn't joking. Sooner or later, he will force Anne to marry this Sergio. It was hard to imagine a more harmonious couple. "Oh, I still can't believe that we met. It's such an accident. This acquaintance could easily not have happened. But we met, and now I'm happy," and shared her joy. Irene was smiling, but she was uneasy in her heart. Meanwhile, Anne was talking about her new friend. People are usually happy to talk about those they love. That's how it was with the younger sister of Irene. Hearing about the chosen one, Irene became more and more tense. "No, my father would never approve of such a choice." "Well, Anne will definitely not give up and will not submit to the will. What will happen?" The guy's name was Anthony. Irina didn't really understand how they met. Anne did not stop at this point. Much more enthusiastically, she talked about the youngest person. She and her friend went to watch a yard match. Alice began to tell. She was pleased that she could contribute to this story, add the missing piece to the puzzle. Irene did not know at least some of what Alice knew. "Anthony, my dad," he noticed her and, to get to know her, threw a ball at the girls. That's how it happened. It was a pure accident. Irene shook her head. Sir In told the truth. This meeting might not have happened at all. It must be fate. After learning the facts of her chosen one's biography, Irina grabbed her head. A handsome and charming graduate of an orphanage, who recently graduated from college and served in the army, the owner of a tiny apartment in the most remote and unfavorable area of the city, an employee of a local factory earning pennies, no housing, no relatives and prospects. Such a son-in-law did not appear to his father even in terrible dreams. Irina was initially worried that Anthony, the most ordinary Alphonse. My father warned that, as children of wealthy parents, they might sooner or later encounter such personalities on the way. But then, when Irina saw Anthony, she realized that she was worried in vain. The young man was genuinely in love with her sister. It was in his eyes, in every gesture. He would put his arm around Anne's shoulders or take her hand with such tenderness. It was simply impossible to play it. The guy, on the contrary, tried to hide his feelings from others. It is clear that he was a modest and simple man, direct, sincere, ready to do anything for his beloved. Anthony made a pleasant impression on Irina. Yes, her sister would really be happy with such a person. Only this union will never happen. Well, they'll meet for a while. Then, when my father finds out about the affair, he'll quickly put an end to everything. His parents had completely different plans for the fate of their youngest daughter, and lately he had been talking about them out loud more and more often. I'm going to marry you to Sergio and breathe easy, my father joked, glancing at Anne, and then let him suffer with you. It didn't sound too serious, but the head of the family was really going to give his daughter to the son of a companion. Everyone knew about it, including Anne. No way, and replied in the same joking tone, not Sergio. I'd rather spend my whole life in girls than be the wife of such a bore. The father immediately began to paint the merits of the future son-in-law and marriage with him in general. My father wasn't wrong about that. Sergio was really grasping and strong. Next to him, Anne would have lived almost the same way as with her parent. The girl would have to become like her muff, a silent, submissive woman who warns her husband's every desire and is afraid to cause his displeasure. But Anne is not like that at all. She can't live like this. Irina understood this perfectly well. Anne would never marry Sergio, no matter how much her father insisted and persuaded her, especially now that she has Anthony. They are so happy together. Young people really look very organic, like two halves of one whole. Irina was worried about the whole situation. My father talked more and more about the upcoming wedding as if it was a done deal. Anne argued with him, tried to explain that it was not the Middle Ages when parents did not ask their children's consent to marriage. The parent got angry, tried to convey to the younger daughter that he knew better how to act in such cases. I'm tired of my opinion not being taken into account even in such matters. I am already an adult, an accomplished person. You're nobody without me. It's good that you have an education, a job, a place to live. These are yours. It's all thanks to me. Where would you be if it wasn't for Rich Daddy? I washed the floors in the entrances. I would shift papers in the office for pennies and pull money to paycheck. Everything you have is my merit, he said. I don't have the main thing, freedom. I feel like I'm in prison all the time. And even now, such scandals were happening more and more often in the house. Anne hoped to bring her father to reason, to convey her point of view to him, but she only made it worse. The parents decided that they needed to hurry up with the wedding and even began preparation. It seemed to Irene then that the father had much more respect and sympathy for Sergio than for his own daughter. Anne herself blabbed to her father about her relationship with Anthony. It happened in the heat of another quarrel. You've never considered anyone's opinion. You didn't care about the feelings of other family members. Anne accused the parent. He insisted on an early wedding again.
I'm responsible for you. That's why I control everything I can. I think it's so easy, especially when you have a rebellious and disobedient daughter like you.
Sir, and you're just used to having everyone obey you and continue to argue. Rena would like to go up to her sister at this moment. Take her by the hand. Take her somewhere. Doesn't she realize that she's only making it worse? Her every cross word makes her father tighten his grip more and more. But Anne didn't seem to be afraid of him anymore. She said all the things to his face that she had wanted to say for a long time, but did not dare. She accused her parent of total control and even called him a tyrant. The wedding is in exactly 1 month. My father finally said in a tone that made it clear to everyone that this was how it would be. I see that you urgently need a steady hand. Sergio is the man who can handle you. I'm sure of it. Oh, and I'm not going anywhere near this man. There's no getting away. I'll run away then. I have a man I love, and he loves me. We will definitely be together. Whether you want it or not, it doesn't matter at all. Your opinion, you see, has dissipated. His father had already heard everything he needed to hear, and there was a flicker of alarm in his eyes. Well, who is he? The parent inquired in a calmer tone. So you won't know that for sure. Anne shook her head. I just said in my heart, just a friend. It doesn't matter. Anne tried desperately to fix the situation, but it was difficult to hide the truth from her father. After all, he was a good judge of people, and now he managed to notice that his youngest daughter was really dating someone, and this relationship is very serious. Of course, my father found out about Anthony. Apparently, he introduced someone to follow Anne, maybe even hired a detective. He'll be fine. In general, the parents soon had enough comprehensive information about the guy is an orphan, without money, without a proper home. Of course, my father was furious. He decided that Anne had simply decided to annoy him. That's why I chose the most unsuitable person imaginable, and she should have met a homeless man. My father said with a wicked grin one day after a family dinner. Victor, Erin's husband, went on a long business trip, so the woman returned to her parents' house for a while. She wanted to somehow support Anne during this difficult period for her. Who would doubt it? You've poked your nose into my life again, Anne sighed. Now that you know everything, I can probably leave.
I've been wanting this for a long time. Go away. Unexpectedly, my father agreed calmly. Leave right now in what you're wearing. You won't take any things with you. No expensive jewelry, no branded clothes, no mobile phone, which costs more than your beggar's apartment. Because I bought all this for you, and you don't respect me. You don't appreciate me, so yes, of course, Anne nodded, getting up from the table. I'll just go up to the room and get the documents. I have a right to them.
Accordingly, you will not work in my company from tomorrow either, continued the father. Spin as you like, since you're so mature and smart. Anne nodded again silently. Then I went up to my room, quickly collected my documents, and went down. Thank you for finally understanding me. She smiled at her father. Maybe someday we will be able to communicate again as a daughter and father.
Anne is gone. She went to Anthony's. They started a life together. The girl got a job as a teacher at an elementary school. I had to take special training courses, but according to the girl, she even enjoyed studying, and she was really excited about her job. Henheim's so happy, Anne shared with her sister, and Honey and I support each other in everything. He is so sensitive, so attentive. He's working hard for me. Everyone worries that I had a better life with my father. He doesn't understand anything yet. I'm only really happy now. I am happy with my loved one, and finally, I am free.
And also really liked the new job. She wanted to work with people, especially children. She liked to see the return on her labors, liked to make others happier. And now, finally, Anne felt in her place. But Irina did not think that her father would leave her sister alone. She often saw her parent in a gloomy mood and understood perfectly well who was responsible for all these experiences. No, Dad won't put up with it and won't really let Anne go. He still hopes that his daughter will crawl to him to ask for forgiveness, having failed the ordeal of poverty. But this did not happen, and the father began to get angry. One day, Iron overheard a conversation between a parent and an old friend, and this dialogue confirmed her guesses and suspicions. Dane, the head of the local police department, came to visit them one day for a cup of coffee. Nothing special. It happened a lot. Mother, as always, set a beautiful table. The old friend sat for a while and then went to their father's office. Raina spent the night with her parents again. Victor's business trips have become too frequent. He was developing a new project, so he had to travel to different cities, and Irina did not like to be alone. Irina sat in the living room, in front of the TV for a while, and then went to her room. Her path led past her parents' office. That's why she became a casual witness to that conversation. No, Irina has never been seen to be overly curious before. The men were talking in low voices about some of their business, and Irina would have passed by if she hadn't suddenly heard her sister's name. This made her stop and listen. I thought she would come crawling in a month ago. My father shared with a friend. This goat lives as if everything suits her in poverty, with some beggar and rootless, with a sweet paradise and in a hut. Simon thoughtfully remarked, "She's just stupid. She is still young. She does not understand that she is ruining her fate with her own hands." "That's also true," Simon agreed. He always agrees with his father because he sponsored many of his projects. It all ended with the fact that the father asked a friend to put his daughter's faithful in prison. She knew that her father always achieves his goals, but at such a price. Is he really ready to put an honest man in jail just to get his way? Irina suddenly felt desperately sorry for Anthony. He doesn't deserve this. This sincere, kind guy shouldn't end up in jail. You can't do that. But what to do? Simon will do whatever his father tells him. This man owes too much to his old friend. "It's possible," friend Simon replied, as if to confirm Irina's thought. Back in her room, Irina immediately dialed her sister's number and told her everything. Subsequently, Irina thought more than once about how she should have acted in that situation and always came to the conclusion that she had done everything right. If Anthony had been imprisoned, she would probably have had to return home. Her father would have achieved her obedience because he would have held Anthony hostage. Anne would have married Sergio with threats and persuasions, would have stayed in the city, would have been nearby. And it so happened that Irene deprived herself of her closest person, her own sister, with her own hands. Because the very next day, Anne and Anthony disappeared from the city. They just disappeared. And yet Irene felt that she had done everything wrong. But my sister is happy. For her, it's so important to have a loved one nearby, an interesting, though not prestigious job. "Thank you so much for the warning," Anne said after listening to Irene. "You have always been a loyal and reliable person. If Anthony had been put in jail, I would have followed him. We would both be unhappy, and now we need to escape from the city and urgently. We probably won't see each other for a long time now." As where to run to, Irina was scared. It was only now beginning to dawn on her that she and her sister were breaking up for many years. "I don't know that yet," in reply, "and C and I have yet to resolve this, but we can't stay here. There's no way. Actually, there is nothing holding us here." This phrase is unpleasantly scratched. "Irene, how is it? Nothing holds." "What about her, the older sister?" "Suggest you. It's just a pity to part with you." As if reading Irene's mind, and added, "This was the last conversation the sisters had." However, Irina did not know this at the time. It seemed to her that this was simply impossible. Sooner or later, he and Anne will meet, and everything will be fine again, but not fate. Father, he was furious when he found out they were missing. Irene looked at Alice sadly. He searched for them, hired detectives, reported them to the police. He put everyone on their ears, but Anne and Anthony seemed to have disappeared. No trace, nothing, no wonder. As I found out quite recently, they have gone very far. Apparently, they were scared and even changed the documents. Looking for this couple in our vast country is like looking for a needle in a haystack. My father had to accept it. It was hard to believe that a person accustomed to total submission would not give up so easily at once. He's been trying to find Anne for years, but he and Anthony hid well and were apparently happy because Anne didn't get it. So everything was fine with her. She probably would have liked to talk to me, but she was afraid. Anne knew what kind of man our father was, and she was happy to escape from his influence. She started a new life. Is this really true? Alice blinked in confusion. What she had heard did not want to fit into her head. Eisenbaum rarely talked about her family, and I was too young to find out about it. This is interesting to me now. I was going to look into this issue in the future. It's true, only now has the father changed. They found a disease in him. He has nothing left. No amount of connections and money helps in such situations. He rethought a lot on the threshold of eternity and realized how wrong he was. He is very tormented by the story of her father wants to apologize in time, and he plans to apologize to Anthony too. Now he's just a sick old man who needs to see his daughter before he dies and admit he's wrong. And my father asked me to find my sister. I couldn't refuse his request. especially since I've missed my sister for a long time and nothing threatens her anymore. Anne would be glad to know about it. And so, how did you do it? Alice asked. After all, you said yourself, even the detectives couldn't cope. Even the professionals didn't track down my parents, but you could, and I hired new detectives who couldn't cope either. And then chance played its part again. I came across a photo on the internet. There, the teacher and her class posed against the background of some hills. Yes, your mother was there. She has changed over the years, but I recognized her. Probably one of the children posted the photo on a social network. I followed the link and found out the city and Anne's new place of work. However, I could not find the page of my sister or Anthony. They do not use social networks. Of course, they were afraid that their father would find them that way. He was really a very scary person back then. It's his fault for what happened to Mom. Alice clenched her fists under the table. Irene sighed, but did not object. Everyone makes mistakes, and the woman shook her head. As long as a person is alive, he can fix them. There is always a chance. He's alive, but Mom's not it. How will he ask her for forgiveness, Nass? I'm afraid this news will finish him off. I could barely stand it myself when I found out about what happened to Anne.
I haven't told them yet. They are hoping, waiting. It's good to have you. You're like a ray of light, hope incarnate. I think it will be easier for him if he apologizes at least to you and Anthony. Of course, if he wants to talk to him at all.
Alice stared intently at Irene's face. She finally understood why this woman seemed so familiar to her. After all, the girl saw almost the same facial features every day in the mirror. Aunt and niece looked like two peas in a pod.
Now, my mother's words became clear. Alice remembered how sometimes her mother looked at her for a long time and carefully with a smile on her lips. Then she repeated that her daughter looked incredibly like a very good person. So that's who she meant, the older sister. When Alice got older, her mother would definitely tell her about everything. But the tragedy claimed her life, and the mystery remained a mystery. And it was too painful for my father to remember the past. It is unknown when it will leave. If it wasn't for Irene, Alice would have been in the dark.
The girl suddenly reached out to Irene in a fit. She understood her aspirations and hugged Alice tightly. And so they sat. Irene stroked her niece's hair. The girl snuggled closer to her loved one, and this gesture was so natural, so ordinary, as if Alice and Irene had known each other all their lives. The girl felt that she had another close and dear person, and the realization made tears run down her cheeks.